So I am going to do a little bit of an introduction for each of these folks with me because I find that to be easier than asking people to talk about themselves, maybe slightly more comfortable, and I can brag more. So that's Christina Amazan. Christina is a creative copywriter with nearly 8 years of experience under her belt. You may have seen some of her work in campaigns for brands like Gerber, Dove, Suave, Vaseline. After full-time gigs at FCB, Gray, Havas, and Edelman, Christina is currently exploring her creativity as a freelancer. For now, she clarifies. But what remains constant is Christina's passion for D&I. She strives to be an advocate for her community as a mentor and panelist in hopes of inciting positive change in the industry. Christina proudly hails from the 4A's MAIP class of 2010 and holds a BA in art history and advertising from Florida State University. That's Christina. Yeah. I'm also joined by Komal Charania. She is currently an assistant account executive at Mother New York, where she interned through the MAIP class of 2018. As a recent graduate from the University of Texas at Austin, she has found understanding the full communication landscape important in her professional advertising career, specifically attending workshops such as #SeeHer to fulfill D&I clients' needs organically. As an advocate for diversity and inclusion, she also aspires to push for inclusive practices in the workplace beyond checking boxes. We're going to talk about that. And one of the ways she does this is through mentorships for first-time MAPers and MPMS students. So if you could welcome her as well. I'm Saneel. I'm also a MAIP alum. I was in the class of '99. Yeah, wow. I heard the oxygen come out this way. So I might add a little bit of perspective as well over the course of this chat. So this is really about professional journeys, but we did a little bit of prep together in advance, and one of the things we talked about was we have a unique opportunity because we're in a room of people who can actually impact what talent looks like at companies that they aspire to work for, and that's really important. So we are going to try to be a little proactive with maybe some thoughts on that, and hopefully we'll also get some questions and discussion going relative to some of those opportunities. But before we dive into that, I think some context on journey will help. So Christina, why don't we start with you? Can you first tell us a little bit about maybe how you were imagining your journey in this industry, and then maybe where and how it's deviated to where you are today?
Yeah, I started in 2010. It was my junior year of college, and I interned at Saatchi & Saatchi Wellness, which is pharma, and that was not part of the plan. But it was a refreshing experience, and that sort of steered my career into pharma and the health and wellness space. And that's been cool. I've worked on, as you said, anything from baby formula to contact lenses. So that was a happy surprise in that respect, because I didn't really study it in school. I had all plans of working in a museum, and then I ended up in advertising, so it's just been a really varied journey. As far as how MAIP has sort of helped foster that journey, I learned about MAIP through an alum, and they told me that I should apply, and I was like, oh, whatever, I'll try. But I applied, and it was a very rigorous process, so it's not just, anybody can just join and join the ranks. It's really, the best of the best. It's kind of like a...
No, there's no argument up here.
Yeah, so I think that really set me up to really push for myself in the industry. And they've been a support system throughout, especially now that we have Alexis on staff. Is she in the room? Hey, girl. Really helping out the alum with her programming that she's coming up with. So it's been a really supportive journey from MAIP.
Cool. Obviously, different stage of journey for you. Want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, so I actually found out about MAIP on Facebook. It was a really organic conversation with one of my buddies in high school. My first internship was through Edelman. I was doing public relations. That's what I majored in school, and I was like, okay, this is a great journey for me to get exposed, know more people, go to New York City. I've never been outside of Texas, so that was a really amazing opportunity. And then I realized that, PR is probably not my thing. I wanted to learn more about account and just, again, understanding the 360 part of advertising. There's so much going on. So I did MAIP again my second time, got Mother, realized that I really enjoyed the creative, independent feel, and I really valued a creative, big idea. And that's kind of where my heart led me. And I was really supported by MAIP, and the alumni there too, as well as just the people that put on all the functions that we had over the summer and meeting all the different agencies we had. And I continue to be supported. I have Jacqueline that reached out to me. She actually interned with me my first MAIP year, and when I came back, we just like DM'd on Instagram. So social media has been a very important part of like, me fighting about MAIP and just like in general. And we just kept in touch in that way, and it's very like a great community to be a part of, and just following each other from different parts of the country has been amazing, and just kind of following everybody's journey.
It's interesting to hear how both of you did, and pretty early on, almost immediately did something different than you were expecting to do, I guess, certainly from college. One of the things that seems to be, and actually I thought it was really relevant in the succession story and discussion, is I think there was an idea of planning your career over a much longer period of time at some point generationally, and there's clearly been a shift where maybe, you don't have as long a plan forward or as specific a plan forward. Can you guys, and this is a slightly unfair question, but I'd love to hear an answer. What is a window in which you kind of look forward? Like, is this, how does career planning kind of work kind of at these different stages?
Yeah, okay, so there definitely was a plan for me. I felt like I'm a very rational human being sometimes. I'm like, okay, I know I want to go into an agency and I want to like eventually become a managing director at some place. But that's definitely not how my journey started at all. I thought I wanted to do crisis communication and be in PR for the rest of my life, and that was not what I was looking for when I interned at my first agency. And then I realized slowly that the people that you get surrounded by very early in MAIP, they are so much more multidisciplinary than you actually get exposed to in school and just in general. It's like you don't have to have just one type of skill set. It's like you can be an account person, but you can love photography, you can love fashion, you can love this whole cultural like relevance and be into politics and society, which is like, people are like that. People aren't very straightforward. It's being human. Yeah, so and that in its sense like transcends into my career in my future. It's like I don't want to just have this straight line idea of how I want to transition and grow. I want to be able to take D&I and diversity and inclusion and my passion for just like fashion, thrifting, social and political issues happening, and take that and drive that and put that into my culture and my plans for my future. And that kind of leads me to like doing things at Mother too. Like in itself, it's like you find an agency that matches your goals, and it kind of inclusives and it makes it a lot better to work at an agency like that. So I think it's way more fluid than it is like step by step, and it comes from programs like MAIP, and it comes from programs that like have people that do multiple things, and it just is more organic in that sense as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you that I don't really have like a straight beeline path for my career. I think what's great about MAIP is that it exposes you to other people's career trajectories. Yeah, that's the word. And you see that there's so many different possibilities, and specifically with people that look like you. So I've seen people stay in the industry and make it all the way to the top. I've seen people leave the industry early and go in a completely different direction, whether it's entertainment or media or film or, Elaine Welteroth was a MAIP alum, and now she is like a star in Hollywood almost.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's beautiful about MAIP, is that you get to see all the different trajectories. But I think everyone is sort of trying to follow their passions, whatever that may be. And sometimes that really translates into side hustles. So, I'm really passionate about screenwriting, so I'm trying to, become the next Issa Rae and like figure out, that path, while I'm still really passionate about advertising and copywriting. So, definitely not a straight beeline. It's very fluid.
One thing we've talked about is there's a lot of help kind of starting in the industry, like recruiting, kind of the upfront part of it. I think it's hard to provide help as you get later in your career, especially when you haven't necessarily pointed at a single point in the horizon that you're taking a straight line to. So there seems to be a bit of a gap, and you guys brought this up, which I thought was really interesting, more on kind of the talent development side or the retention side. So it's almost like our industry has woken up to putting resources in up front as it relates to bringing diverse talent in the door, but not necessarily, there aren't as many support services along that way, especially as it becomes a curvy path, that some companies provide. Is there, I think anyone in this room would probably love to hear, are there things in particular you think could be useful tools? What are the things you can give someone on a meandering journey when they are, they don't just have their foot in the door, they're now kind of developing in the industry?
Yeah, I think mentorship is a huge part of that. Having that in place at your company so that I can connect with other people, whether it be a man or a woman, a person of color, whatever it may be, just to see like how they got there, and then I can take what I can from that conversation and make my own path.
And is that mentorship something that, like in a formalized sense, where let's say an agency you work for or whatever company it is assigning you one, or where do you find like mentorship actually most actively helps you?
I personally feel that when it's more formal and it's part of the company's values and beliefs that we want to make you better, and that means through mentorship, that means sending you to conferences, that means whatever that means to your development. So I personally appreciate a more formal setting so that, and then that doesn't necessarily mean like they pick my mentor, but they give me the platform for me to do that at work is really important to me.
Yeah, and I agree in that same sense too. It's mentorships are very important. And I mean, starting off early in my career, I just like literally started 6 months in. So it's been very different. And I still have those mentorships very, very like still, and it's very strong. But I agree, like how far does it get to where you're kind of like, okay, I don't really know where I want to go, what my next step is. And I kind of need someone that is in the same place that I was, because right now I'm so in this area where MAIP is still very prevalent. I'm very close to that community, and getting a mentor at work is something that I already have, but she's also 3 years in and she's trying to figure out her life too. So how do I find someone that I could also relate to that has stuff going on obviously, but also is in a place that they could have a mentor and really foster that, because it's a lot of times people are just like, okay, great, you're a person of color, let's put you together and like, figure it out.
That isn't the relatability.
And that's like not the exactly. It's like, let's find a person that, you know, has time to mentor and foster and kind of figure out what you like and what you want to do in the future. It comes out more organically in that sense too, like Christina was saying.
What makes a relatable mentor for you? Is it that they've had the experiences you've had? Is it that they just see the world the way you do? I mean, could it be someone mentoring you who doesn't work in the industry? How does, like, what is the common ground?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be someone that's working in the industry at all. One of my best mentors actually is a recruiter, and she had an experience. She never did MAIP either. She actually found out about the program later in her career and then started becoming a mentor for MAIPers. And me and her bonded over social and political issues and like how we are both passionate about that stuff. We do both happen to be people of color, but I think the reason we, you know, bonded so much was this idea that we, beyond advertising, had other passions and had other interests and ideas. And I think that's what's so important. It's like, it doesn't have to be someone that's going the same straight path as you, but somebody that understands the industry and at the same time can relate to you and your personal passions.
I think one of the things you said was that one of my mentors, meaning that you have like a team behind you, right?
Yeah.
I think that lends itself to having different types of mentors. Like I might have a male mentor so he can like boost my confidence. I might have a woman mentor to show me how to, you know, fight the system. I might have a person of color to help me navigate my career in that way. So, and it doesn't even have to be a creative person. It could be someone in finance who could help me negotiate better for salaries or rates. So having that sort of teams behind you that can pull to your different interests and help you develop is good.
You know, the other thing that's come up a few times is it doesn't have to, you mentioned it can be a formal platform even if they're not assigning your mentor to you, and obviously each of you taps into different people for different expertise. But there's a little bit, there's a theme in that came up. Christina, I think you brought it up on the phone when we chatted before, which I thought was super interesting, which is you pointed out that, you know, historically, let's call them diverse talent, irrespective of like kind of what form, often have to create their own kind of safe spaces or their own systems, to your point. Like you have to maybe be given the space by a company, but then it's on you to go and create it. Can you, just talk a little bit about that so people have a feel for kind of what you meant, and then maybe we can start to explore what channels could even exist for companies to help with those things instead of putting the onus on you.
You know, some of the vets in the industry that were people of color have sort of came up with the affirmative action, so they just wanted a foot in the door. and we work to get them that. And then fast forward a couple of generations, we've moved beyond respectability politics, where like you must act and be a certain way at work to get respect. And we've evolved into being, we want to bring our true selves to work. So we fought for that, and that's where we are. And then now coming up with Komal's generation, which I'm kind of part of. We're both millennials, I guess. So I'm a little older, but sort of the millennial generation, some people might call it entitlement, but they have advocated for themselves that, it's not enough to just get me a foot in the door. Yes, I'm bringing my true self to work, but also company, agency, I want you to be a place that I want to work. So it's not a sense of entitlement, but it's a sense of a new standard, a new level that we expect from the companies that we work for. So, even me now, I'm like, so do you have a chief diversity officer? Because if you don't, I don't know if I want to work there. It's not like an entitlement thing. It's just like, these are my standards now. And it's no longer just enough for you to like, give me the opportunity. It's like, what are you doing for me as well? So I think we've seen that evolution over time, which is great.
Yeah, the expectations get higher earlier in your career. Like
yes.
you don't, I don't know what it's like for you, and maybe you can help us understand it. But I think at one point, as you said, there was this idea of like, success is I got my foot in the door, and now I almost accept the burden of having to sort it out. And I feel like certainly now that would be below any reasonable bar probably for anyone 6 months into their career. But talk about that a bit.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like I feel what Christina's saying. It's like you come from programs like MAIP and MPMS, and they not do everything to tell you about how great the industry is and how diversity and inclusion is so important, and how you should have standards for yourself. We have literally workshops about how you should negotiate. You should definitely look into some sort of, relocation, or just figuring out a way that you should value yourself. Value is a very important thing that they teach us in these programs. So it's only natural for you to go into the industry being like, okay, I definitely want this from my company, and I want them to have culture in some sense, in some way. I want them to value my opinion, even if I'm a junior, but they did hire me in a sense because they do value some sort of me, so I would want to give my true self to them. So I think Christina's right in the sense that companies should foster that individuality, because they did hire you for a reason, rather than have you conform and kind of figure out and adjust to their environment, because then you're not giving your full self, and then there's no point of you being there and doing the best work you can.
So there's two variables here, which is super interesting, especially kind of sitting here as the old one on stage, which is there's where you are in your career and how your expectations change. But then there's also just cultural advancement, right? Which is to say, like, there's a collective generational shift in expectations. And I think those two get talked about separately, but rarely together, which is, as you said, whether you're both millennials or not, you're multiple years ahead in your career path, right? You're more experienced in that way. So even the way you think about certain things like entitlement or value are inevitably different, right? And inevitably the same is true for me. And so over time, you look back and you say, okay, at some point the gap between generations gets large and plays a role. Just fundamentally, that's true of anyone in any industry, right? Where you go, somehow the next generation is always ruining the world, as every generation has thought before. And something about that is extra complicated when you feel that you've come up or achieved something through your own journey. And it's human nature to almost kind of view it that way. And I think it's something worth commenting on, because I think, if mentorship is indeed this critical role that people need to play, and each of us, mentor somebody down the path, which I love about kind of our community, there's also this element of, but I probably view things differently, or I value them differently. So you have to find a way to find some of that common ground without explaining just how you did it your way, which is a hard balance to strike, I guess, and it makes it complicated. It's hard. One of the tools that's we talked about that feels useful is ERGs, employee resource groups. Are you guys members of some? What are they? How do they work? Talk about those.
Yeah, well, I'm freelance currently, but at my previous jobs, I've been an active member in their ERGs.
Yeah.
And what's great about ERGs now, first of all, they exist. We've come a long way.
Progress.
But what's interesting now is that I've seen that there's more partnership between ERGs and different companies, or different ERGs within one company. So it's become more of a collective effort instead of just like, 5 people of color in a room talking to each other. So that to me says that the industry is moving in the right direction. But yeah, what about?
Yeah, I have been a part of ERGs in my past internship, but this specific company, Mother, doesn't have anything. We don't have an ERG, which is totally cool. We do things differently in that sense. We're more independent. So if we do want to get an ERG, you have to kind of just go up to like a key stakeholder, like somebody that's high up there who's on the second floor of our building, and just be like, hey, this is really cool to me. I really want to do this. This is something that I'm really passionate about. Can we start this? And I think that comes with a little bit of hesitation, because again, I don't have the, I guess, clout to just be like, hey, I want to start this, can we do it? It's kind of like I need to have people that can also have my back and figure it out, and like have some sort of environment in place that I could feel like there's a safe space that we could talk and have that. But for me specifically, I find ways to do that, and because I am still close to the MAIP community, I could go out and go to like the MAIP Summit, or find places that I can have those programs that can still support me. We do talk about finding ways to get diverse talent. So this past month, I did go to the MPMS recruiting session that we had, and I went with our recruiter just because I did the program before too, and I wanted to get Mother more involved in that sense, so they kind of understand the importance of diversity and get that a little more into their pipeline. And then we had a more client-facing workshop called See Her, and like Christina was saying, it's like not just people of color, it's men, women, and just people that care about diversity and having some sort of inclusion in the industry. So finding ways to do that for me was more proactive, and I had to go out and seek those opportunities.
You work at a company that wants to enable those things. I mean, these are people who can impact these things at their companies, and I think there is this kind of tension sometimes of, by formalizing it, are you somehow devaluing it, or are you like actually maybe suffocating it by being the one to initiate it? Like, what is the right relationship there? I mean, knowing there isn't one universal answer, just anything from your various paths where you feel like you have a sense of that would be great.
It's a tricky line to walk, because as a person of color, I feel that, the issue within the industry is not my fault. It's not my problem. I didn't create it. So then to put the onus on me to fix it is kind of daunting, that on top of all the work that I have to do at work. So I really lean on, leadership to sort of take that role, take that burden off of me. And I think that, it's great that some agencies really put the power in the hands of all the people in the agency. Even at your level, you can go to your C-suite level people and bring up an issue. But I strongly feel that companies need to take on that responsibility themselves.
And is the responsibility the creation of the space to let employees self-organize, or is it, no, we're actually formalizing how you measure the success of an ERG, or the operational parts of it, or like, investing in it from a money standpoint? Like what is, money.
Money,
yeah.
Yep. I don't know, that's my love language. Show me you care. But it's true. Like if you,
I don't think you're ever going to not be freelance again. By the way, well done.
If you put the money behind it, that shows to me that you're at least invested in it. So give us the space, give us the funds to have the programming throughout the year, not just Black History Month, not just that one day in February that we have a potluck and like have fun. Like it's I'm Black every day, so keep the program going. So yeah, I think it's very programmatic. So there is a formality to it, but also give us the leeway to be creative and think of programming for ourselves. So I think it's a delicate balance. You're not stepping on anybody's toes if you want to create an ERG at your agency and you're not part of that disadvantaged group. You could be a man and start a woman at insert agency here. You can be a white person and say, hey, I want to support the people of color at my agency. It's all about allyship and privilege. Everyone has privilege in this room. Even I have privilege. I learned this like 3 months ago, but I was like, wow, I have privilege. But I do. Like, what's my privilege? I'm cisgendered. That's a privilege. I'm not struggling to find my next meal. That's a privilege. So everyone has privilege, and privilege is sort of like a currency that you can use to help people. So I think
I love that you're saying that. I feel like somehow, I sit in a C-suite that is, more diverse than many, but clearly we have an ambition to broaden it. And one of the things I always find most interesting, this is not just true of RGA, but just even in many, I'm in a different boardroom every week, and it is interesting to hear there's almost like this idea of I have privilege, but I don't feel like I have permission, because somehow it'll be inauthentic if I'm the man who starts the female group, or if I'm the white executive attempting to, is it somehow disingenuous if I'm attempting to stand up and help the black people out? And there's like a self-consciousness there that it's amazing, which you hear on that side, that I think most people would go, no, we would welcome that, or step up or do something. And somehow I feel like maybe the voice of permission, which I think you articulated really well, is missing sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Allyship is a huge deal. Just a little anecdote. One of the best trainings I ever had was not like a diversity training or unconscious bias, which are great, but it was a presentation training. And one of the things we learned was about how different mannerisms, body language that you use in meetings and in the workplace can raise or lower someone's status in the room. So just being conscious of that as an ally, like if you see that your employee is constantly being cut off, be the ally that lets them speak, give them the stage to talk. If you see that an employee is being used as a prop on a pitch, like I can't even tell you how many times I've been added to a pitch deck because they want to show that they have diversity, but when we win the business, I'm not on the business. So being the ally to say, hey, that's not right, Christina was part of the pitch, she should be part of the business. So these little micro sort of moments that you can be an ally, is the way that we push this initiative forward. Because a lot of companies already have the D&I structure in place, but now it's the next step is allyship.
Komal, what's been successful allyship for you? Like who or what, or how does someone pass on privilege in some way where you feel like you've benefited from it, or could benefit, or you wish they would, maybe is a better question.
I think it's really important what Christina was saying. It's like standing up for people in a meeting, even if it's very small. I do that myself, even when it's like with women that are way older than me, been in the industry for longer than I have, and just bumping off of their ideas. I don't think it matters what age you are and kind of where you are in your life either, because at the end of the day, we're all here together and we're trying to do it together. Ways that I find that very important and comfortable is at Mother, our managing director, she is a woman of color, and she very strongly has straight opinions about how she feels about things, and she is very blunt and honest about it, and she is also Asian American, which sometimes it's kind of hard to see someone that has that kind of position and is the managing director of a company and is that outspoken. I remember I grew up like learning that you kind of have to take a step back and like be a little quiet and reserved and like respect authority and stuff like that. So seeing someone that is of that level and is that blunt and honest in the way she wants to talk and say things about anything and everything that's there, it's kind of motivational in that sense too. And on top of that, she's not only encouraging people that are her status or like a woman, but she goes back and reaches out to people that don't have the same experiences as her either. She's very great in that sense, and I think that's very important because what Christina was saying is she recognizes her own privilege as being an Asian American and going back and reaching out to people that don't have that same type of privilege. So I think that's really important, and also seeing that in my company is very important as well.
Yeah, it shows you that it's valued there in some way.
Yeah.
I want to bring it back to retention and development because, as we talked about, there's a lot of resources. It feels like kind of whether they're, no matter who's kind of started them, company resources around giving each other a space if you are somehow an underprivileged kind of set of talent in some way seems important. But if you are, again, one of these talent people in the room, what are the focus areas around development? Like how do you say, you know what, this is what this group will value as it relates to development. This will keep them in the door, because I think right now there's a lot of space creation, certainly a lot of budget requests that are probably not being approved at the level they would like. But what are those things that at least you guys as kind of the very talent they do want to retain and develop? Like what comes to mind is like what would be on that wish list, if you will?
Yeah, one of my love languages is money or gifts, but that's neither here or there. But I think one of the things that I felt is most important to keep me in the door is to show me that you are connected to culture and that you care. we were all there between, anywhere between like 2012 to now. Every other week was a hashtag of someone that died at the hands of police. And I'd have to see this on social media and on the news and then go into work and act like nothing happened. And we never talked about it, no one acknowledged it, just passes by. But that's a trauma that we had to deal with every single day. And I just realized that literally throughout my career I've had to do that. In the 8 years that I've been working.
Had to do, feel like a subject is being ignored at work when you would rather someone else have to initiate the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, there's this serious thing going on in our culture and we're ignoring it on a daily basis and acting like nothing happened. It's business as usual. So I think a small thing that companies can do is acknowledge it publicly and internally. I think some companies do a good job of it. White and Kennedy, they have a strong sort of outward-facing support of their employees and their people of color. Even if it's just a tweet, even if it's just an email, hey guys, we heard that this, tragic thing happened. If you need someone to talk to, if you want to get together on the roof and have a moment of silence, anything, literally anything, to show me that the company cares, not just about the bottom dollar, but the well-being of their employees is
Absolutely,
huge.
yeah. And that ties so well into the generational comment before, because inevitably, depending on what generation you are at any of these companies, I don't think we're choosing one in particular, there's a generation that was taught you should not do that because somehow that is politicizing or it is inappropriate in some way. Like that is like part of a culture they grew up professionally. Then somewhere else you have a culture that's like, well, that's inauthentic, or how could we just go about this? Like, you're not bringing your whole self to work by not addressing it, right? And so there's also this kind of generational gap, and it's amazing to see. At RGA, Bob is someone from RGA, keep me honest, I want to say 71. And Bob talks openly about, what I think I watch other people, depending on their age, react to is like, oh, Bob is talking about politics in a meeting. And it's like, you can tell for them it's a stressful thing when Bob has an opinion and he's talking about it. And then somewhere else you see yet another generation that's younger going, yeah, and they react positively to it. And it's almost like somewhere along your career you've been taught that one is appropriate or inappropriate. And I think there's age ends up being the dynamic more than maybe even some of the other factors I think we tend to focus on sometimes.
The lines are blurring though. Culture is, and even with politics, it's bleeding into culture. You have rap artists that are standing up for political ideas. Athletes standing up for political ideas. So there's no longer any hard lines.
And using the privilege they have that you just said, they understand what their privilege is and they're attempting to be generous with it.
Yeah, and even like in our industry too, like you're in an industry that you're selling to people, so I don't understand why we're not relating to people and what's going on in the world. It's kind of just like almost obvious, like the people that are working at your company are not only just interested in growing the company, but also people that have been there and are doing other things that are multidisciplinary. Like Christina said again, like you have athletes that are supporting political causes. You have artists and musicians that are doing things to stand up for what they see in politics. So it's definitely not weird to have someone in a company talk about what's happening in our world, and tying that back into like ERGs and just even finding a way to make that more inclusive and fluid into our industry is really important and natural almost. I feel like it's very organic.
So I'm going to ask the really hard question here, which is, so now you're the boss and you have a different political view about something, or whatever it may be, and this is a tough dynamic in a lot of places, which you want to try to create a place that's inclusive and not just pretend you don't see it, or it's an issue, but it's sensitive in some way, right? And I think at a lot of agencies, agencies tend to broadly fall on one end of a political spectrum, okay, and that has a lot to do with the business they're in and creative backgrounds, et cetera. But ultimately, how do you, if let's say you do have maybe a minority viewpoint and you're in a position of power, how do you as an employee react to that? You hear someone say something that is just, you don't necessarily agree with. Do you now feel like it's become a place that is less welcoming, or you're less empowered, or is it better that they're transparent about their view? Like what is as you kind of look up the corporate chain, how does that work? Because inevitably there are differences, right?
I'll tell a story. One, at my last agency, It was right after the Kavanaugh hearings, and we had a town hall, and it was not about that at all. It was about, you know, how the business is doing. It was a quarterly town hall. And at the end, he said, look, things are happening. And I see that, you know, a lot of people are kind of whispering about it in the hallways and, you know, sort of watching it on their screens. And I'm open, having this open discussion with you, that I want to create something where people can feel open to express themselves and support each other during times like these. So he's not necessarily taking a side.
Yep.
He's not pushing forward his point of view.
Got it. It's the acknowledgement that this thing is
that
happening.
there is something happening.
It's
if you would like to talk about it, if you would like to create something with me so that there is a safe space, I think that's the way to do it. It's not about picking sides or, you know, I'm a Democrat and this is what I believe. It's not about that. It's just about allowing people, especially disadvantaged people or, disadvantaged people to have a space for them to talk.
Yeah. I agree with Christina 100%. It's like a lot of times we feel like, oh, you're on the wrong side and that's it. And I feel like that's kind of the wrong way to go about it. It's about figuring out what the issue is at hand, educating yourself and not being ignorant and not being too, I guess, modern in the sense too where you're like too progressive and not understanding the other opinion. I'm not saying the other opinion is always correct either, but being a very being very 360 in the approach that you're taking and understanding that there needs to be a space to have that conversation and be very educated and not ignorant about it too is important.
It's interesting that, you know, if indeed seems to be an overemphasis of resources on the recruiting side versus the development or retention side, it's amazing because when you just hear the requests you guys are making, it is as simple as creating formal or informal space. I mean, that really is like, ultimately, those are pretty simple, hard but simple, you know, I think requests to companies, and hopefully some of the people in the room can hear that. We're going to run out of time here in a minute, but I want to tie this back to a comment you made, which is, oh, you don't have a chief diversity officer. Okay, that stuck with me. What is it? I think the most relevant first question is, what should the chief diversity officer be doing? Like, what is that job as you would want it to be, as someone who values it as a place you'd consider working? I'd love to hear the answer to that, and then we can talk a little bit more about, I guess, the relationship an employee would have with one. How many chief diversity or inclusion officers are there in the room, or heads of those things, chief or otherwise? Do you guys have just really short hands, or is it only these two? And then okay. I was like, I know we have one, and he's not raising his hand, but I see it. Okay, so a few. Yeah. Okay. What is that? What is that job as you perceive it? Or what should it be?
Well, I think since it is a C-level position, they have a responsibility and they have goals and metrics to hit. I've seen anything from, we just organize functions at the agency, like randomly, to having sort of really hard goals to meet during the year. My last agency said we want to raise our diversity of ethnic and racial diversity by 5% by 2020. So those are hard sort of metrics to work towards. So I think.
And is the person accountable then? So if that doesn't happen, then it is the chief diversity officer's job, or equivalent head of whatever this may be.
I would think so.
Metric, yeah.
A CEO if the business doesn't do well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a tricky thing because, like, you know, it's difficult to bring in that talent and retain that talent. But that's why there's the role created for it, because we realize that there's a problem and that needs to be fixed, and there's a person that's heading up that initiative. I'm not in the business of telling people how to do their jobs, but.
That's me asking. You're not putting words in your mouth, but I think it's helpful to hear that perspective. Is, you know, you're the target audience, so yeah, I think sometimes it helps to hear what your expectations are. Yeah. And you chose to work at a place that doesn't have one. As you said, it feels like it's because it's independent and flexible that I guess was a non-issue for you. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I necessarily don't think that having a chief diversity officer sometimes changes things or not. I've never been in a company that has had one, so I wouldn't really know the job descriptions that it does have. I would think that any company that does have one, though, does value diversity and inclusion enough to have something that important in that C-suite level. What attracted me to Mothervo wasn't the fact that they did or did not have one. It was the fact that they retained culture and were always emphasizing the importance of doing things their own way. An example of that was like over the summer during, I think it was the FDA banned getting any blood from anybody that was a gay man. So we decided to do something that was more like outspoken, and we decided to make t-shirts and print it with the blood of gay men, and just kind of did that as a thing that Mother wanted to do, and just get that out there and just show our stance. So we do things differently in that sense, and I think that was something that was really important to me because we just took that as a proactive measure, and that's the kind of person I am too. And anytime I'm like going out to do something that's diversity and inclusion, I'm like, okay, this is something that's important to me, and like my purpose in being in the industry is to be able to push that, so that kind of matched my level with Mother. But it would be great to have someone like that because it just shows that we're heading in a direction of progress and trying to make that more fluid and trying to make that more of an inclusive environment. So I think it's a good and a bad thing in some senses too, because you want to make sure that that is authentic and it's happening and it's working in the industry and in an agency.
Cool.
Yeah.
We have 3 minutes left. Did we also collect Q&A for this session? Great. Can we put those up, or can I see them? Amazing. Okay. First one is, what have your current or former agencies done specifically to ensure you thrive there?
Not a lot. I think that my most recent experience has been the best so far. They have programming where even the little things like every month they would have people kind of share out any side projects or interest or trips, or if they went to a conference, they come back and report back on their experience. So that has been really cool to expose you to different people from different walks of life in a more informal way. But more formally, they've sent me to conferences. Add Color, the One Club. They've advocated for me to be on panels. So, not only am I representing, or I was representing them as an employee, but they showed that they valued that these experiences that are out there, they wanted me to have them and then bring it back and give back to the agency and share out information. As far as career-wise, not much. And I think that's somewhere that needs improvement as far as programmatically, like how are you ensuring, it's not enough to just have us in the door. Okay, we have 5 people of color here. Yay, that's not enough. What are you doing? What systems do you have in place to ensure that they're excelling alongside their white counterparts? What mentorship things do you have in store for them so that they feel like they're supported along their journey career-wise and professionally, not just culture-wise?
Yeah, agree with you in that same sense too. Specifically at my company, we do things a little more like art and culture based. So anytime we're talking about society or culture or just politics in general, we do like an art gallery, and you can be interested in like leading that up or being in charge of that for the next thing. So I think that's really important to me because it's kind of like taking a step aside from just like your day-to-day job and flexing the things that you don't normally flex at work. So that's been really important in helping me thrive and just like being good at everything and anything. There hasn't been anything formal like a mentorship. I kind of had to seek that out through my MAIP internship that then turned into a mentorship through my agency with 2 MAIP alums that have been there, but it wasn't set specifically by my agency. It was more of a MAIP thing. I wish there was something more specific like that though at my agency, and understanding that I don't just necessarily need a person of color mentoring me the whole entire time. I love that though, because having a MAIP alum is amazing because they have that same experience as you do, but not all the time we have the same goals, and that's a very important part of a mentorship. Yeah.
Cool.
I'd like to thank Christina, Komal, and Saneel. Thank MAIP.